This PowerPoint presents information from an effort that has been in the works for 5+ years. The paper is titled The BIM Body of Knowledge, Task Definitions, and KSAs for Academic Practice. We believe that the content that we're providing within this information will be beneficial to the academic community. The presentation will provide the background for this effort as well as where our committee is headed in terms of future work. Although our main committee consists of more members, Tammy McCuen and Glenda Mayo will be presenting the information today.
The AIC operates with the goals of improving communication and discussion concerning how academics around the world have been introducing BIM to their students. The BOK project is part of the AIC's mission to identify and act upon issues related to transforming facilities education to meet the need of collaborative lifecycle focused facilities industry in the information age. The BOK project itself started in 2015 by the group of AIC leadership who are the primary researchers and developers of the BOK. It is a project that was a catalyst intended to investigate expectations and perceptions of professional BIM practices and performance outcomes. And in this presentation, we will focus on how the task definitions and KSAs play a role in assisting academia.
This slide shows the various viewpoints that were utilized to develop the body of knowledge. These categories are shown visually on the next slide as well, but each category was necessary to capture the entire picture for BIM use. For example, LOP, or level of performance. This may be beneficial in academia with the different expectations that employers have for entry level versus full or expert level. So we had to address each of these categories again to capture the big picture of BIM use. This matrix is a basis for the different perspectives in terms of data collection. Collectively, the need to view these perspectives for BIM uses resulted in a total of 96 different scenarios. So we had a lot of data. The results can be found in 2 previous articles on the body of knowledge, and these were published with the ASCE Journal of Construction, Engineering, and Management. Feel free to reach out to us if you need a copy of these. The results of the Delphi study revealed that the achieved consensus levels followed a similar trend for both expert and mid-level performances. However, we found it interesting that at the entry level, there were high levels of disagreement about those same expectations. So in other words, for academia, this may be problematic because there are different expectations in terms of those that hire our students and what they expect those deliveries to be from those students. A possible interpretation is that the industry holds a high expectation on what BIM experts are capable of doing, and it's also possible that this lack of agreement is due to the discipline-specific focus at the entry level, where typically personnel are building technical knowledge through deep dives into a limited number of tasks. The body of knowledge effort was also compared to other literature explaining their process and approach to a body of knowledge for an industry. The AIC followed a similar approach to the literature. We want to mention here that part of this phase development, of course, included the consideration of Bloom's taxonomy. This table shows the comparison of steps with a select few of the literature content we examined. We compared the steps to developing a body of knowledge and noticed that one author used Bloom's while the other one approached it from an exhaustive topic list first and pulled from those all the entry-level understandings of the topic. So there were 2 different approaches. However, that second approach still compared to Bloom's, but they just did it after the data collection and found that many of the objectives were at the middle level. In the case of our own effort, we included all levels in our inclusion of the levels of performance, that LOP that we mentioned in an earlier slide. One caveat to mention, though, is that these levels do not always align neatly with Bloom's. So in our use of the body of knowledge and developing curriculum assistance, we've had to really work around how we approach Bloom's taxonomy and how we integrate that into our work.
In this slide, you see the BIM BOK workflow plan, and it shows the phased approach that we've taken for our work in the development from phase 1 through the future work of curriculum development and benchmarking in the workplace performance for credentialing and hiring practices. Although the workflow indicates a single curriculum task, that development process will be expanded to be inclusive of all roles or disciplines within our industry, and it will not be developed as a one-size-fits-all.
The purpose of a Delphi study is to define an issue through the use of an expert panel who continues to take the survey until a level of consensus is reached. In our case, we determined that no consensus would be reached for the entry level, but it had reached the desired level of percentages for the other mid and expert levels. Tammy will explain how our effort to define the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or KSAs, and task definitions assisted to refine and validate our data once this Delphi study was complete. Again, this was an exhaustive effort on behalf of a panel where we had 96 scenarios and a time-consuming process to go through 3 rounds of surveys. The findings are reiterated again on this slide.
In phase 3, the task definitions, KSAs, and validation of those KSAs were completed. We used the task definitions that have been established and adopted as industry practices and standards in an international venue of BIM groups. The KSAs were developed by level of performance, so entry level, middle level, and expert level, recognizing that one size does not fit all, and as a BIM specialist comes into a company or a firm, the expectations for their KSAs will be aligned with the expectations and roles within that organization. So those KSAs, because they are considered special qualifications and personal attributes that one needs to have for a particular job, the KSAs were consequently vetted and validated by industry practitioners in the designer role, constructor role, and facility manager's role. The curriculum mapping and development efforts that are the next step in the BOK use and application by academics is currently underway and in conjunction with the outcomes from our group's KSA validation. Stratified purposeful sampling was used to recruit the SMEs who participated in validation of the KSAs, which were developed for each role and job performance level in accordance with the BOK. Discipline-specific questionnaires were created and used to perform semi-structured interviews with SMEs from their respective disciplines within the BOK. Each participant was asked first if they agree or disagree with the KSA for each job task relative to their level of performance and role. Participants were also asked to follow up with any recommendations for future versions of the BOK. In this slide, you see an excerpt from our questionnaire used for semi-structured interviews with the SMEs. The validation of each and every KSA for the different roles and levels of performances had real challenges, and the primary challenge being these interviews were very time-consuming and often had to be split into 2 or more sessions to accommodate our industry practitioners. However, we chose this approach to collect the data rather than a survey because the benefit of interviews that allow us to clarify and get additional discussion with the SMEs that just simply would not have been available in an online survey. So a lot of rich data was collected through these interviews. However, it was quite challenging with the time. Responses gathered through our semi-structured interviews and questionnaires were analyzed by agreement and disagreement. There was a content analysis completed with the questionnaire by item and role, which the participants were asked to include their recommendations for improvement and future consideration within the BOK. Those recommendations were categorized into one of the 2 categories shown here. The first being a recommendation that was supported by documented practice, such as an industry standard or an industry recommended practice, as you might find in the National BIM standard, for example. The second category used was a practice that's not supported by documented practice. So, for example, a company's internal practice. And those 2 categories were ultimately used in our data analysis of recommendations. Where do we go from here? At the time of this paper, task definitions along with the KSAs for each level of performance had been completed. The researchers at the time of the paper were early in the process of KSA validation. However, at the time of this presentation, the validation process had progressed into the next phase and of data analysis. The expectation is that the outcomes from phase 3 will provide a reliable source for BIM educators and trainers to use in their design and delivery of BIM instruction based on a set of KSAs validated by BIM subject matter experts who actually practice as professional designers, contractors, facility managers, and consultants in the current built environment industry?
So again, the purpose of this paper was to begin to advertise the effort that we've been going through to develop this body of knowledge. There's still a lot more to come and a lot more that we have to do. But the expectation is that these outcomes from phase 3 are going to provide a reliable source for educators and trainers and will support effective design and delivery for BIM instruction. Some examples of the things that we're working on now are mapping assistance for course outcomes and SLOs, and specifics regarding the tasks that need to be included in the curriculum. So these are all things that I think are going to help the academic community, especially in terms of those that teach BIM. For this last slide, we wanted to provide you with the contact information and the website for our effort. Feel free to contact Glenda Mayo or Tammy McCuen if you have any questions. We appreciate your time. Thank you.